going to take a look at the convoluted way the book explains all this. It's not going to be pretty. I'm just giving that to you straight out from the front. I think the book makes this like way convoluted and complicated. So always you could go back to the two previous videos where we explain it in a way which I think is pretty consumable. But anyhow, let's jump in on how the book does it. So the book says there's a p-value approach and a critical value approach. And those two approaches, p-value approach and critical value approach, are what we did here. P-value approach, critical value approach. Oh, I should put critical value here and critical value approach. So that's my mistake there, but that should have said critical value approach. And the p-value approach compares the calculated p-value to the significance level alpha. P is for probability. And so here, the p-value approach, here's our alpha, here's our calculated p-value, they call it, and we compare the calculated p-value to the significance level alpha. Here's the significance level alpha. We compare those two. This is the calculated p-value, and we compare them to make our decision. That's called the p-value approach. The critical value approach compares the test statistic, z or t value, to a critical value, right? And so here, my test statistic is being compared to a critical value, and they're calling that the critical value right there. So that's the critical value approach, the z-value approach, test statistic approach. So yeah, I called it the test statistic approach, but critical value approach would have been what to call it. But this is our test statistic, and this would be like, I guess, the critical value, because we calculate the test statistic, the z or t value, to the critical value. And the test statistic is the z or t value, and the critical value is the z or t value at some confidence level, right? So that's that. And then here we talk about this. We've already talked about that. Then here are the two new formulas. We've already talked about this and explained the different parts, but you can pause this video. In the previous video, we talked about it, and I broke out what these different parts were just to sort of make sense of it. So it's not just a bunch of crazy characters that you're memorizing and you don't quite understand it, but we connected it back to this thing here, right? And that all makes sense. So thank goodness for things making sense. And so here is like their explanation of the p-value and critical value approaches, developing your hypothesis, figuring out the level of significance, like, getting your test statistic, -2.67, right? Like we did all that. I really like this approach here where you just kind of look at the question. And so I guess at this point, I'll bring this one over, and then I'll grab, I have another one, right? I got this one. Is that the one? I don't have another one open. Is this it? That's it. And so where you look at the, and we'll do it like we had it before, just so we don't confuse people, because symmetry is important. So you just list out all your stuff from the problem. I like to highlight it and just focus on it and then list it all out. And then when you list it all out, you're like, all right, well, what can I do with this stuff? Well, I could get, my interval. I could get my range. And I'm just like, what is that term? Because it's late. I could get my confidence interval, my interval estimate, and like we did in chapter 8. And so you do that, and you get this graph right here, and you can say, well, that's where my confidence interval is. That's my range, and 99% confidence that this is where the population mean is going to fall, and my population mean's falling outside of that. So just based on that, I could reject the null hypothesis, and so you could list out everything. You can list it all out and then do that. And then also you could do this calculation for a one-tailed hypothesis test of the population mean where the population standard deviation is known. And you can get your p-value, your z-value, and then get your p-value. When you have your z-value and your p-value, then you're able to, here are my z-value and p-value. You could do the p-value approach, and you could also do the critical value approach. And so at 0.01, which is 1% of the data is this way, what is my z-value? It's 233. And so I could compare them this way, and you could see for my, the sample data that I gathered that they're in the area where you're going to reject it. They're in the 1% area. So that's like stuff we've gone over, but kind of good to review it. And that's what they're doing here, -2.67. And then p-value, they're getting the, I guess I kind of liked it. I'll do my Control-Shift-T and bring this back up. I kind of like seeing this. So now I'm going to bring this one. I guess I'll bring it over like that, and then bring this one over here. And it's kind of nice to see all those calculations here. So here, the p-value approach, 0.0038, that's what we came up with. And then here's where they start to introduce these rules about, hey, just reject it if this is less than alpha and it's a one-tailed, left-tail thing. And then they provide a graph, which I don't think is very clear, but you can pause the video and try to make sense of it for yourself. And then there's the critical value, and that's the 2.67 versus 2.33. So likewise, we came up with that 2.33 right there, right? But they're the same approach. And then I also don't really care for this graph because, I don't know, it's just not clear to me. And it's okay, but it could be better. And then, so that's the one-tailed hypothesis testing p-values. And so I think this is moving into new stuff here. So we'll save this for the next video. But that's the end of this one. Actually, this is all in orange, and I put stuff in orange if I want to stick with it. So let's stick with it. So, here it says a little bit about the p-value. And again, I think that's probably confusing, but you can pause the video and you can read about it. And then here are some of these rules. That makes sense, actually, when you read about it, right? One-tailed, overwhelming evidence, like if, I don't know, p-value is like less than 0.01. And this is like saying the alternative hypothesis is true, but those make sense in the context of this. When you read this, just look at that. It should make sense. And then critical values, here's some more of these rules they want you to memorize. If this is less than that, then accept this and reject that. And I don't like that. I like drawing these little graphs right here. So test, statistic, critical value, and so you can read through that if you like. And then one-tailed hypothesis testing, here are the steps that they suggest, but we went through them all. Anyhow, that's the end. That's the end of this stuff. And for me, doing one-tailed hypothesis testing for a population mean, just come back to this example, right? And remember that in this example, we listed everything out. And in listing everything out, we were able to do what we did in Chapter 8, and we were able to come up with this. And then we also were able to use this new formula here, z-value, for this type of a situation. And we were able to come up with our z-value and our p-value. And so we got that for our sample. And then we know this is at the, 0.01 level of significance, or the 99% confidence level. So then we could go find the z-value associated with that, and then we could just compare these. And that's the p-value approach, and that's the critical value approach. And I think those names are kind of too bad. They should have just said p-value, z-value. I like that much better, because that's what you're doing. But they have, this is test statistic, and this is critical value, and the critical value approach. And I just think that creates like more extraneous terms that kind of create an insider's club, right? Until you know them, you're on the outside, and you have to learn all this jargon. It's kind of a hassle. And it makes it unnecessarily confusing. So just remember this. This is how we're going to do it. And it's what they're doing, but it's just a simple way to understand it. All right, see you in the next video where we're going to go into territory where I haven't highlighted the slides yet. So I'm going to be reading through those here in a minute and highlighting them, and then we'll talk about them. See you in the next video.